Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friends Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Makone Maja. Let's get into the first news story of today, and that is that the ANC in KZN is in trouble. Now, looking at the last election results, you may say to yourself, well, yeah, I know they're in trouble. Their vote share dropped significantly. Well, no, it's not just their vote share that seems to be going down. It's also their organizational capacity. So it's been revealed that the ANC in KZN has failed to pay 40 staff members and is shutting down offices across KZN. Apparently, this is due to, quote, a budget drop after the party suffered its recent election losses. Political parties get a percentage of the of funding from government based off of how many seats in legislatures and parliament they have. And with the ANC's recent losses, they are certainly not getting as much money as they used to. Of course, also the party been having problems raising funds from private donors too, which is definitely, I think, not really helping it. To make matters worse, the ANC also believes that a couple of its officials have essentially defected to MK, and while they still may be officially employed by the ANC, they are actually perhaps working for MK. And I think this is a story that's definitely not going to go away anytime soon. I think in the run-up to the next local government election, we're going to see quite a few defections in KZN in particular from the ANC to MK. Also, a number of ANC constituency offices across the province, which are being shut down. And to make matters worse, there are also kind of organizational mess-ups that are just kind of embarrassing. Like apparently the signatories of the caucus bank accounts are still with the old members of the provincial legislature, some of whom are no longer actually in the legislature. And that means that people who aren't actually in the legislature have to approve spending for the current ANC MPLs in the province, which is, shall we say, not an optimal state of affairs. At the same time, President Mbeki, while speaking at the University of South Africa in Pretoria, said that the ANC has promised several times to do an audit of its membership to find out bogus memberships, lapsed memberships, that kind of thing, particularly in KZN. And I think the implication here being that the ANC should focus on reducing the strength of KZN within the party's internal structures, and yet has not managed to do so. Makone, it really seems like the ANC is in a lot of trouble in KZN, and I don't see any recovery coming anytime soon. What do you make of this?
I think those defections are so effective, particularly of councillors, right? Because they're forced by elections, and then ANC can, in an instant, like overnight, lose its support in those key areas in KwaZulu-Natal. So I do think the MK hasn't stopped plucking in those needles into the final coffin of the ANC. Very, very effective way of shifting constituencies, shifting support for the ANC. Although, yeah, I'm sure for the voter who are still supportive of the ANC in KZN, it's not ideal. These incidents are also how I personally came to know of people who have since become prominent, like Edwin Sodi. He was summoned at the State Capture Commission to come and testify about how he, as a recipient of billions and billions worth, maybe more multi-millions than billions of tenders, as a recipient of tenders providing services to the state, also bails out the ANC and pays off ANC members' salaries at Luthuli House, right? So it wasn't in KZN. In this state capture incident, it was back at Luthuli House. How he manages to do that and whether there isn't a conflict of interest, obviously there is, because those rents which he collects when those tenders are issued and won, then go back to Luthuli House where they pay off salaries or bail out the ANC. So that's how I, for example, came to know of people like that. And I'm wondering what then happens when those people have so much of the spotlight on them that they're not able to freely carry on business as usual as they did in the state capture era. So yeah, the ANC is it's fragmenting in more ways than one, not just in its supporter base in terms of voter base, but also those people who are able to bail them out, who are awarded tenders in a favor that's done to them. And then in terms of quality of membership and its decline, I couldn't agree with the former president more. I think that scope for who should be disqualified as a member of the ANC should be extended, because you're never going to get prosecutions you're never going. I am black-pilled about whether those state capture prosecutions will be coming. I've even forgotten about them. I have let them go because I just don't see that happening. I don't think there are incentives, and I think, in fact, there are disincentives to prosecute them. So I do think the scope needs to be widened, and I think also it needs to be made easier to kick people out of the ANC. And if a prosecution is the standard, that's far too high, because we shouldn't expect those. Those are not coming. But yeah, something lesser, something that can catch a few of those fish than the current rule allows.
I think if the ANC wants to recover itself, it needs to not only reform away from some of its sillier, unproductive ideas, but also get a bit leaner and meaner. Now, that means kicking out people who have done dodgy things. Well, then do it. They're just, those guys are just dragging you down, and I think that's partly what Mbeki's trying to tell his party. Anyway, let's go on to our next story, and this is about the DA Minister in Basic Education, Siviwe Gwarube, who has initially promised to hit the ground running by eradicating pit toilets. Now, she was answering questions from MPs, I believe, either yesterday or Tuesday. Actually, I've forgotten which of those days. But anyway, this week, on for the first time as the minister, and she was talking about a number of issues. One of the issues she talked about was the eradication of pit toilets, which the ANC has promised, I think, for more than 20 years across South Africa, and yet it just never seems to happen. Gwarube says that her department is on course to eradicate pit toilets in schools by the beginning of April next year. She gave quite a complicated answer as to what exactly is going on. She said that there had been projects initiated by the ANC when they previously held that post to eradicate these pit toilets, but that basically due to corrupt tenders and people not being held accountable when they didn't do work and shoddy workmanship, that kind of thing, that the problem was never really being solved, because either things would be built very slowly, or alternatively, structures would be built that were of such poor quality that within a few years they'd break, and then people would go back to using pit toilets. If she manages to pull this off, I think a lot of ANC MPs, no, we still don't know. You know, she's promising by April. That's quite a big claim, and that's not that far away. But if she manages to pull this off, I think the ANC should really hang its head in shame that it was not able to do this after so many years of promising it. What do you make of this story, Makone?
I am elated by that possibility, but more because it's such a win for service delivery. Like you said, it's 30 years past democracy, but also we're well into modernity. Nobody should still be dying in the pits of a toilet. So I wanted to see this. I wanted to see the minister come in and set like very low targets, very low hanging fruit for what she'll be able to do during her term, because there's just so many structural institutional problems with the DOE that, you know, if you set high aims, then you're not going to achieve most of them by the end of your term. So this is a good one. It's one that, you know, will unite people in favor of her, and she already has so much support. I'm sure that it will only continue to rise. But I also want to say, I've been watching these appearances of ministers at the NCOP and the National Assembly, and may I urge the MPs to please improve the quality of their questioning. Nick, I don't know if you've bothered. The questions are literally, when is this going to happen? Can you make a statement on that? Can you promise that this is going to happen? They're not probing, they're not prodding, they're not investigative. It's like you're just there to show face, and so that when the PMG group shows the committee meeting notes, your name appears there, so you asked a question, but the question is really so lazy. And I understand that we're trying to get ministers to set targets so that we can hold them accountable. That's important. But there's so much more that we would like to know about what has been failing the South African education system for so many years. What has Minister Motshekga been doing? And not to speak pejoratively about her, but really perhaps she's had legitimate challenges that we do not understand as South Africans. There's just so much more to uncover about those issues, that questions about when is this going to happen, or can you confirm that you will still do this? They're not good. They're not best. We could really improve the quality of parliaments if the questions really go into understanding what those portfolios entail.
Yeah, now that we have a proper multi-party government, and now that we also have a parliament where no one has a majority, it really is, I think, time for the DA is usually pretty good at asking questions. The EFF sometimes is got some pretty good questions that it asks, but many of the other parties, the ANC in particular, have just they've usually used questions as a way of just defending the administrations. They ask these extremely softball ones. And I think that also a lot of the other very small opposition parties haven't really been that good often at asking questions. Maybe the Freedom Front sometimes, but generally speaking, yeah, I agree that there's a lot of missed opportunities, and with Parliament, now a more vibrant place and a more interesting place, that is really on the MPs to step up and I think start using that institution as it is meant to be used, which is that the cornerstone of our democratic system.
I do want to give them benefit and say maybe it's because it's still early days for them, but while they're still wetting their feet, this is the opportunity for them to really improve the kind of questions that they ask moving forward and being genuine about holding the government accountable.
All right, so our next story is that the BRICS New Development Bank, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, group of countries, has decided to approve a 5 billion rand loan to help fix Transnet's problems. Now, on one hand, money to fix our broken rail infrastructure is, I think, a good thing, but not if we don't actually improve how the money is spent. Makone, what do you make of this?
Absolutely right. The issues that are plaguing Transnet are not just financial, right? In the sense that you're not just going to get a loan and wave a magic wand and those issues go away. If you look at Transnet Engineering, for example, that they have this issue of locomotives that are parked for periods exceeding 90 days. They're called long-standing locomotives. We've had that issue for such a long time that we do need to bring locomotives back into operation so that they can haul more goods and Transnet can make more money. Of course, that's an issue that needs to be addressed. But that issue started with the tender, the 1064 tender, and how it was handled. So if you're not dealing with those institutional issues of how Transnet functions operationally, you can solve for those superficial financial issues like not enough revenue to buy locomotives or to buy the parts that are going to fix locomotives. Or if we're speaking not about rail, but more about ports, you're going to get money to fix cranes at transit port terminals, which obviously wear and tear very quickly because of the environments in which they operate. They deteriorate very rapidly. You can fix those issues, but if those operational, managerial, management level issues are not being addressed, and every time something goes wrong, you give it a couple of years to forget about the previous scandal, and you go and you dip into the mashonisa purse, as I call it, loaning, as a way of fixing those issues, we are just going to be back here in another cycle. We're just going through cycles and cycles of bad operational management and how things are being held, not just at state-owned entities, but we've seen this at municipalities as well. And so I'd really like to caution against the use of loans and the ease in which we depend on loans as a way of fixing those structural institutional problems that you punted to in your opening, Nick.
Now, for too long, the ANC has attempted to solve every single problem anywhere in government with small money. We just put more money into it. But if you're spending the money badly, it's like pouring water into sand. You're never going to get any return on that investment. And the key example of that, I think, has always been our education system, which receives the largest share of the budget. It's actually, especially compared to a lot of other African countries, pretty well funded. And yet it produces some of the worst results in the world, which I think is a key example of how our government does not spend the money it does have wisely. And so getting more is really not going to help you unless you actually make it a little bit more efficient. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Oh, go ahead, Makone.
I was going to say, sorry, I know you're in a rush. I was going to say how we get that money is also important, because loans come easily, but how we pay them off, and watching how debt servicing costs are increasing as a line item in our finances, like eventually it'll grow to the size of the biggest budget item that we have in South Africa. We're paying as much. It's already
second. I
there
believe,
we go.
Our interest that we pay is the biggest, second place. So yeah, no, this is just damaging our future to, I don't know, make some sort of temporary feel-good fix that isn't actually going to be a long-term one. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. We hope that you found this show interesting, and we will see you all tomorrow on The Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone. The Daily Friend Show and The Daily Friend are a project of the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR. The IRR is a think tank which was founded in 1929 to study race relations in South Africa and works to change government policy to improve race relations through non-racialism and to ensure the prosperity of all South Africans. If you like our work and would like to support us, please go to irr.org.za and click Support the IRR. Or you can go to thedailyfriend.co.za and click the Fund Us